In the last episode, James and I discussed the importance of aligning spending with values and goals, and then allocating and bucketing cash by goal. Today, we're going to shift our focus to scenario testing within a financial plan and talk about how that adds value for clients. To talk about this, I'm going to be interviewing Gregg Daily, one of the senior wealth managers at Schneider Wealth Management. So for the first question, I would say almost all of our clients have one or more major goals that they'd like to save for, whether it be increasing expenses in retirement or buying a second home. But why is it so beneficial to test these scenarios in a client's financial plan prior to them actually, spending the money on this goal?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because oftentimes we have kind of a base scenario for retirement that says, okay, if you work this long and you save this much and you want to spend this much later on, we think we have a general understanding of what that looks like. So anytime you change one of those dynamics, right? So if you decide you want to buy another piece of property or the proverbial boat or something like that, you always want to test what the real impact is long-term on your finances, because that's an unplanned for expense based on the original calculations that could very much change the dynamic of what your retirement savings looks like. So depending on what your finances are, a large six-figure purchase can have a really significant impact on your retirement outcomes. And the time to know that is now, not 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, right? So that's the reason we want to always test those things, is to see what actually happens if you do that. And then we're kind of helping the client make a much more informed decision.
And we typically define a successful plan as one with projections that move up and to the right. So in other words, the assets continue to grow in the projections, or they at least stay flat, right? We don't see it going downward, which is always a source of concern for us. But there are times that, we do plug in these scenarios and we see the asset projections really decrease, whether they totally run out or just get a little too low for our comfort in the end. So how does scenario testing help clients move forward or maybe not move forward with a major goal after seeing this?
Right. No, that's a good question. It really kind of dovetails with the last question in the sense that, it's okay to make a decision that has a really significant impact on your retirement savings and spending. It's just important that you understand what that impact is before you do that. So like you said, you want the chart to kind of move, up and to the right. It's okay if it flatlines because you make major purchases or other expenditures or life decisions. It's just really important that as a client, you know that it's going to do that before you make that decision. So we have plenty of people who will make, large purchases or expenditures, but our job is to always make sure that they know exactly what the outcome is going to be if they do that, so that when they do that, or if they decide even not to do that, at least it comes from a point of being well informed as to what the results and what the outcomes would be.
So I actually built in a scenario. This is a hypothetical client. We can see their projections here as pretty much moving upwards, dropping off a little bit after retirement, but they still stay significantly high. They end up with about $14 million at age 95, where we've set the end of their lives. But if we do some things to change that, so this scenario happens to be a young family, we add, hey, they want to start a home, they want to start a family, so we're adding the purchase of a home at $450,000. We're adding childcare for 18 years at $15,000 a year, extra family vacations after college, 4 years of college expenses. That drops the plan significantly by $21 million. So as I said, we were going to end up at 14. Yeah. And if you drop it by 21, that means we're not even getting to the 14, right? So you actually
right.
end up running out of money around age 85 because of that. So it's really important to look at those extra costs. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we're only going to fund a portion of our kids' college expenses and let them fund the rest. Or maybe we're going to purchase a home that's a couple $100,000 less, look for some other childcare options. So if we were to look at it the opposite way, though, maybe they decide they don't want to start a family and buy a home, and they're going to figure out a way to spend $10,000 less a year and then invest $12,000 a year as well into their taxable investment account. We can see that actually increases the value of their estate by $1.2 million. So now they're ending up with closer to $15.5 million net worth at the end of their lives. I think that's just a really good example. Again, we're able to test a lot of different things and very quickly make those changes in our software so that people can make those decisions wisely.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point too, because, I've had clients in the past who, with multiple children, because their own parents had paid for their college education in its entirety. Now, granted, in years past, that was a smaller number than it is today, right? But, they feel like they need to pay it forward, and, maybe they've got 4 children, and no matter what, they want us to model out the idea of paying for, all 4 years of college for all 4 children. Again, our job is to say, here's what happens if you do that. A, here's how you could try to do that. And B, here's what happens to your own personal savings in retirement if you do that. So whether it's college education for children or another house or a vacation home or any of those things, some clients have the luxury of not worrying about what anything costs, right? But for most people, most regular people, you kind of have to choose what your battles are going to be. You have to decide what you're going to prioritize. So I think when we're using our modeling, we're essentially helping clients decide what priorities make the most sense. And from our perspective, our number one goal is to always tell the client, hey, listen, we want you to get all the way through your life expectancy with a comfortable pool of money to draw from. So our job is to say, listen, if you do these things, this is what the result is. And, maybe we help them choose what their priorities are. And we find a happy medium between, meeting some of those priorities, maybe not all of them, maybe not hitting every goal, but finding a balance between being able to do some additional things that weren't originally planned for, but still having a comfortable enough pool of money to draw from while they're retired. So that, for us, it's typically about, hey, how do we get you the most successful path as possible? Even if you take some diversions, how do we control that to the point where things still work out for you, where you've got money all the way through as long as you're expected to live?
Sure. And that's a good segue into my last point in question here is, sometimes people don't run out of money like that couple did in that scenario, but certain financial decisions could significantly impact their portfolio. So maybe it doesn't take it down to, ending 10 years early, but it still ends them like very close to emptying out at the end, right? It makes a larger impact than they thought it would, because they think, well, I'm only spending $50,000 on this boat. How could it possibly make $1 million impact on my long-term projections? So can you explain why this happens?
Sure, because anytime you made an assumption of a certain amount of savings, having a certain amount of money, and that money, growing and compounding over a certain period of time, anytime you change one of those factors, so people may think, hey, it's only a $50,000 expense today. True, but that's 50,000 fewer dollars that are going to be growing over the long-term compounding. And often there's more to it than that, right? It's not just, we know that, right? We do these things and people say, I'm going to buy, a boat, or I'm going to buy a vacation home. It's not just the price of the purchase, it's everything else that comes with it. So that's another part of it. It's not only the lost money from your pool of funds at the beginning with the initial purchase price, it's the ongoing expense of maintaining that thing over that period of time. And typically, the longer the stretch of time between when you spent the money and what your life expectancy is. So if you buy a boat for $50,000 now, and you're in your mid-30s, and we're going to expect you to live to your mid-80s, that's all those years of missed compounding on those funds. And the longer the time frame, the more dramatic that looks. So if somebody only had a 7-year time frame, they're going to buy a boat, and that's, they've got only 7 more years of life expectancy. It doesn't look nearly as dramatic. But if you're in your mid-30s, it looks very dramatic spread out over time. And you're right, sometimes it's hard for clients to believe when they see those numbers. But, it's amazing when you look at the power of compounding, or in the case of spending more money, the power of missed compounding just by pulling some of those funds out of the equation. It's sometimes a real eye-opener for people.
I really appreciate you spending the time with me today and sharing your knowledge. Just another one of the ways that we as advisors add value to our client relationships and to our audience. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month.